Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee. We are back for City Council Bill 21-0080, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. I'm Eric Costello, Councilman for the 11th District, Chair of the committee. I'm joined by Councilwoman Felicia Porter, 10th District, Councilwoman Danielle McCray, 2nd District, member of the committee, Council Vice President Sharon Middleton, 6th District, member of the committee, Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, member of the committee, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District, Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District, member of the committee, Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District, Council President Nick Mosby, Councilman Isaac Yuchi Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee. On behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott is Natasha Mihu and Nina Themelis. On behalf of Council President Nick Mosby is Matt Stegman and Nikki Thompson. We have Marguerite Kern, who is staff to the meeting. The 2:30 session today is going to be the Department of Housing and Community Development. This will go through 5:30 p.m. After that, we have a lunch break until 6. At 6 p.m., we have BMZA. And at 7 p.m., we have Department of Transportation. Acting Commissioner Kennedy, please take it away. And Councilman Stokes will be assisting vice chairing, so I may turn it over to him at points during the hearing. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to members of the committee as well as City Council. I'm happy to be here today. Alice Kennedy, Acting Commissioner for the Baltimore City Department of Housing and Community Development. I do want to take a minute to recognize staff members that I do have with us today that are joining in on the call. Stephanie Murdoch, our legislative liaison, is here. She's in chambers with me and will be assisting. We also have with us Acting Deputy Commissioner Kate Edwards for Development, Acting Deputy Commissioner Nicole Hart for Homeownership and Housing Preservation, Deputy Commissioner Jason Hessler, Deputy Commissioner Eric Booker, Deputy Commissioner Steve Janes, our Chief Fiscal Officer Elaine Harder, Special Assistant to the Acting Commissioner Stacy Freed, our Acting Director of Policy and Partnerships Kimberly Rubens, and our Chief Communications Officer Tammy Hawley. I do want to say thank you for the opportunity for us to present to you today on our fiscal year 22 operating budget. And Stephanie, you can move to the next slide. I'm going to start with giving an overview of our service number 593, which is community support projects. This service actually covers our CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant program, and funds that are used to carry out a number of different activities, both within city government as well as supporting our outside partners and nonprofit organizations that undertake a various different levels of service within the communities, everything from job training and youth and senior programs to health services, literacy, workforce development, and so many affordable housing development, and so many other critical functions within the community. Major item for this is that the Community Development Block Grant appropriation increased by $17 million for fiscal year 22 per an anticipated COVID award enhancement. And we believe that that award enhancement will also be coming in through home funds, and potentially we also will then have the appropriations for any additional COVID related CDBG appropriations within this service. It is also to be noted that the service also provides support for our Community Catalyst Grant Program, our CCG program, which was started in fiscal year 19, and that is included under Service 593, and it provides both operating and capital grants to a number of community-based nonprofit organizations across the city of Baltimore, with a focus on supporting our emerging organizations across the city, historically working in historically disadvantaged and underfunded areas across the city of Baltimore. Next slide. This is service number 604, our before and after care program. Falls in line with the mayor's priority of prioritizing our youth. This provides before and after care centers at both the Waverly and Northwood Recreation Center, and provides before and after care to elementary school age children in those areas. and no major changes in terms of the budget for this program. And we have been in conversations looking to see, if this program and this service is is a good fit and best fit with the Department of Housing Community Development, and also looking at partnerships with Recreation and Parks as it relates to this service moving forward, potentially for fiscal year 23, but no impacts as it would relate to fiscal year 22. Next slide, please. This is our administration slide, which is service number 737. Overall, the administration provides the support for the daily operations of the department, which would fall in the commissioner's office, our human resources, our budgeting, accounting, and fiscal offices, facilities management, information technology, and other major supports. We have made some adjustments within 737 looking to fiscal year 22. A key item is an operations officer 2 position that was being reclassified to support the Office of Performance and Innovation. And we were able to realize savings for software licenses and maintenance that then we were able to move to service 738 to support our administration of our city's weatherization program. So those are some highlights for that service. Next slide, please. Speaking of 738, this is service 738, our weatherization services. This provides low-income energy efficiency home improvements to residents of Baltimore City. Majority of those are homeowners, but we actually do work with landlords and are able to provide weatherization assistance to landlords and homeowners across the city of Baltimore. Not only do the energy efficiency home improvements help stabilize residents in terms of lowering their energy bills, but we also look for other opportunities to leverage those funds to support broader green and healthy home improvements that occur within the home. The budget changes for weatherization include additional funding to support not 3 additional, but it's actually supporting 3 positions to help oversee those weatherization projects. And it's moving those positions from state funding through our state weatherization grants to general funds, which is something that we've been working on and finding a way to make this change for a number of years. And we're very excited that in fiscal year 22, we're able to get these general fund supports for these programs, which will help us be able to increase the number of weatherization projects and services that we provide to our residents across the city of Baltimore. Next slide, please. Is the Dawson Center, which is service number 740. Many of you know that the Dawson Center is located in the Oliver community, and this is a center that was opened to memorialize the Dawson family in the tragic fire bombing of their house that also brought the issue of witness intimidation to the forefront. The Dawson Center not only supports elementary age children, but also has been expanded to include activities that support our teenage population as well within the community with a wide range of activities. And we are working with Rec and Parks to also align some of the work of the Dawson Center with the Rec and Parks efforts and find ways to complement and leverage each other's efforts within the Oliver community to be able to provide enhanced and expanded services there. Next slide, please. Service 742, this is our promote homeownership. This office provides all of our homeownership incentives as well as, which provide the grants and deferred loans to support closing costs and down payment assistance with the purchase of a new home for our city residents. Also located within the Promote Homeownership Service of 742 is our tax sale prevention coordinator. Many of you have worked with Michael O'Leary in the past and his work not only to assist residents in the prevention of tax sale, but also helping to raise awareness on the available tax credit programs that exist, such as the homeowner's tax credit or the renter's tax credit, and expanding those efforts. There is a recommended budget increase for Service 742 that's directly related to legislation that was passed by City Council in 2020, which is the tax sale exemption program. And we have been working in concert with the Department of Finance to look at the implementation of that program and including budgeted funds to support the implementation of that program going into fiscal year 22. Next slide, please. This is Service 745, which is our housing code enforcement service. Not only does this service cover our housing inspectors, which are under the direction of Deputy Eric Booker, but they also includes some of our demolition work, as well as the legal team led by Deputy Jason Hessler in the litigation as it relates to enforcement and litigation for the code enforcement actions that are taken. And this is also the service where our special investigations unit also resides, which is in Service 745. We do have some funds that were identified during fiscal year 20 and also fiscal year 21 of CDBG funding to help support this effort as part of the overall budgeting effort as related to a COVID response. And we have included that again as a potential source of funds to support code enforcement, to support overall citywide COVID budget targets for this service as well. Next slide, please. Service 747 is our registering and licensing properties and contractor service. This service not only licenses the rental dwellings as part of that process, but also registers our non-owner occupied dwelling units and vacant properties, registers our burglar alarm users, and also our contractors and monitoring companies, and licenses and registers the electricians and demolition contractors and other trades that we have within the city as well to ensure that they're meeting their state mandated qualifications for work in the city of Baltimore. Mostly, we were able to realize savings due to reduction in printing costs and other items for this service, and otherwise it remains steady across the board. Next slide, please. Service 748 is our affordable housing service. This specifically supports our affordable housing trust fund, would fall under the Service 748, as well as our federal home program as well, to support the creation of and preservation of existing, creation of new and preservation of existing affordable housing within the city of Baltimore. This does include a budget for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The one item to note, and this has been a question that has come up, the appropriations, we have existing appropriations within this service for the trust fund due to the excise tax not realizing its total projected amount. And so in order to not over appropriate within this service, we did reduce the amount in the budget that would be tied directly to the excise tax to allow for us to utilize older appropriations so that that's not sitting there and we're able to use those older appropriations. So I just want to make sure that just off the bat that people understand that we are not reducing the budget for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, that we're just looking to use older appropriations and still expect to fall within somewhere between $7 to $9 million in projected income for fiscal year 22 from the excise tax that supports that program. Next slide, please. Our next slide is property acquisition, disposition, and asset management. For some members of the council, this service was formerly our blight elimination service, and in fiscal year 20, that was renamed to the current service name to more better reflect the work that is done within this service in terms of revitalization. So this not only manages kind of our vacancy to value with the sale of city-owned properties, but also maintaining, clearing and holding land for future use. This is the service where we acquire properties through both private sale as well as condemnation. We work through and have to sometimes acquire ground rents as well with those acquisitions. This is where we dispose of property through vacancy to value or RFPs for larger parcels, and also where we perform tax sale foreclosure work on vacant properties, not occupied properties. I want to be very clear that it's on the vacant properties for tax sale foreclosure and other activities as it relates to supporting development and revitalization from the acquisition of and disposition of property for development across the city. And that also includes holding property as well for larger development projects. Next slide, please. Our housing rehabilitation services, this is service 750. This is our service that provides both forgivable and deferred loans and grants to support low and moderate income households to perform home repairs on their property. Housing rehabilitation services works in concert with our other programs such as lead hazard reduction program, which is also within service 750, and also leverages service 738, which is our weatherization services. And these programs often work together to try to provide comprehensive assistance to homeowners across the city and also renters across the city as well. This service is housing rehabilitation services on the rehab, Office of Rehab, and a large portion of the lead hazard reduction grant program is CDBG funded and supported. And the lead hazard reduction program also has a significant federal funding source that's represented in the budget that comes from HUD through their lead hazard reduction demonstration grants. Next slide, please. This is our building and zoning and inspection service number 751. This covers our permits and new construction activity across the city and other related code items as it relates to the building code, and also zoning issues and permitting and so forth. We also had another savings in this service as it relates to our postage and printing costs, and those were realized not only in our code enforcement, but also in building, zoning, and inspections and permits as well. One item to note that we have completed in fiscal year 20, we did complete 92,000 inspections, which I want to highlight, which is a significant increase over the fiscal year 20 target and representative of construction activity that was happening across the city, even within the last 3 months of the pandemic, and even leading up to the last 3 months of fiscal year 20 and the impact of COVID. Next service, please. This is our community outreach services, service 752. This assists in relocation of our intimidated witnesses, also assists with our ombudsman, with other weather-related emergency assistance to residents that may be impacted by natural disaster, or also fire is a significant requests that we get for assistance in terms of assisting with emergency housing, or if there's a gap between Red Cross providing services and where we're able to step in and provide assistance as well. Next slide, please. And then we're going to finish up here with our service, which is 754, which is our summer food service program. The summer food service program is 100% supported and funded by the Maryland State Department of Education. And they fund and support the program actually also through the federal USDA grant that flows through MSDE, which then we access at the local level. And we do want to highlight that this service was a significant contributor to our pandemic response. And for our 20 actuals, we served over 2.5 million meals to our youth across the city under the age of 18 to assist with our response to ensure that our youth did not go hungry during the initial months of the pandemic and then working through the summer. And we're extremely proud of the team for the achievement on that huge number of meals being served during that time and the work that they did to ensure that youth did not go hungry during those periods. So with that, that kind of finishes our formal slide presentation for you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about any of the services at this time.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I just have one question. Service number 745, housing code enforcement.
Mhm.
I'm sure my colleagues, we talk about there's never enough code enforcement staff to get out in the community. Because I maybe Deputy Commissioner Booker, can you tell me exactly how many inspectors you have?
Eric, you're on mute.
Okay, I'm off of mute. Good afternoon, Councilman Stokes, and thank you for your question. We have about 69 inspectors now because we just had a couple of people that have moved on to other opportunities or retired. But when we are mission capable, we have 80 inspectors. We've been operating with about 75 inspectors throughout the pandemic. We've lost a few, but we have 6 in the pipeline as we speak. And Councilwoman Middleton and Stokes, you would want to know that the 6 people that we have posted are apprentices. So we have had some success with our apprentice program, and we are looking to hire 6 more apprentices. They will come on board at I think it's like $33,000, $33,000, and after a year they'll move to $43,000. And most of them are at the ripe old age of 18, 19, 20, 21. So that's still a good program. So right now we're a little bit short, but we're still mission capable, Councilman Stokes. Thanks for your question. And we're backfilling those positions that have moved on to other opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. That's the only question I have. I'm gonna go by the committee members here on the sheet, and my mama taught me ladies are first. So Councilwoman Middleton from the 6th District, do you have any questions for our housing department?
I guess just a couple comments. So,
Okay.
thank you, Commissioner Booker, for that update on the apprentices. I think we had a conversation earlier with another agency. I think it was with,
Hey, Councilwoman, before you start, I'm sorry. I just seen Council President real quick. Council President Mosby, you had a question?
No, I'm on, Mr. Chair. I'm good. You can go back
Okay.
to the Vice
All right.
President.
Vice President, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, it was with when we had the labor commissioner on, and she had met, but we had a conversation about apprentices and apprenticeship along with Mr. Shorter, and how in fact this council is very much in support of just apprenticeship all the way around, and how your department, along with water and wastewater, were one of the first apprenticeships, government apprenticeships, really in the entire country, and how you're working hard to keep that moving. So I definitely appreciate that. Acting Commissioner Kennedy, I just want to thank you again for all the work that you continue to do throughout the city. A very huge department with so many different programs that involve partnerships with all of the agencies. I mean, it is just so important how the partnerships are. and how your agency really helps to move forward other agencies like DPW and, you know, with the trash pickup and checking with checking with vacant lots, and just that communication must be there. And just bringing that up, at least as long as I've been on the council, that 4200 block of Park Heights Avenue has always been focused negatively, not just for Park Heights, but for our entire city, on how terrible they use that picture of that particular block of the problems with vacants in our entire city. And it's come to a point now where something needs to be done with that block. It's just an example of the problems that we face with the vacants in our entire city, and how, from my understanding, all the properties in that block are owned either by housing or HABC, and there's one senior owner in the middle of all the mess. And I guess now she owns that one property, and I guess now she wants out. And of course, the woman has been featured again this year. Again, and I can't say it enough, this is an example of the problems we continue to have. Can you just kind of talk about, I don't know if you want to talk about that specific block at this point, but just, are there any new innovative plans on how we move forward with code enforcement of our vacants, just everything that has to do with the vacants that are owned by the mayor and Baltimore City Council?
Mhm. No, Councilwoman Middleton, I can speak a little bit specifically to that block. I know that I believe that there was a fruitful meeting today with a number of different partners, as you stated in your statement, that a lot of the work, actually majority of the work that we do at DHCD involves a number of different partners, whether or not it be agency partners or community nonprofit partners, council members, our state legislative officials as well, coming together to look to find solutions. And this is that 4200 block is one that is on my radar screen for addressing, finding the funding that we need to support a relocation for the last remaining resident, getting that into the pipeline for demolition, moving things around and changing some priorities. One item that we have been looking at in terms of changes in approach, some of our approach moving forward, we will be looking at opportunities for stabilization in some blocks versus just demolition, which we feel is an opportunity for to attract investment instead of having to have the cost of demolition. Sometimes the stabilization comes into play, and we're able to move those properties into the hands of developers for redevelopment and putting them back into public use. As you know, there are a significant number of vacants across the city, and finding the resources to address those has always been a priority of the department. It is a priority of me as acting commissioner working on that as well, and coming up with comprehensive ways to do block level planning within our communities so that we can prioritize which properties are right for demolition, which properties for stabilization, which properties for disposition, which properties for receivership, which properties for tax sale, vacant properties for tax sale foreclosure, and working with the communities to prioritize on a block level to come up with comprehensive planning and approaches, which also helps us guide our budget on the capital side and the funding that is needed to support those efforts.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll stop right there so and ask their questions.
Thank you. Our next, Councilwoman McCray from the 2nd District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to thank the HCD, the Finance Department, and the Mayor's Office for their work on the implementation of Council Bill 200593 that allows Baltimore City to exempt our most vulnerable homeowners from tax sales. And I want to uplift the fact that Baltimore City is the first jurisdiction within Maryland to use state enabling legislation to do so. As for my question, a portion of the bill created an ombudsman position that the director spoke about earlier. Director, can you speak to how the 2 additional positions will support the tax sale ombudsman position?
Mm-hmm. So those positions are being created, and I will say that we are still working out some of those details. We have a very robust and strong working group that's been evaluating different staffing structures, what will be needed. And a lot of those, the 2 positions will be supporting in terms of the ombudsman's position to provide assistance with application processing, also with education and outreach to the community for, to bring people into the program as well. So it's a combination both on assisting with application processing and monitoring, and also with education and outreach, because we are putting together a application for the program that will be an online application that is accessible from a cell phone or a tablet. But also we recognize that given some of the residents, as you stated, in our most vulnerable populations have access issues to internet or even a cell phone. So those positions will also be assisting to get paper applications completed and picked up and ensuring that we're able to effectively implement the program.
Thank you. For my second question, you mentioned for Service 738, you stated that we provide both landlords and homeowners with weatherization options. In what instances do we provide landlords with assistance via our weatherization program?
Mm-hmm. So weatherization can support landlords in typically 2 different ways. One, we often have in the past worked with some landlords where they have a lower income population. So the income level for weatherization is 200% of poverty. And we can work with a larger development. So we have done kind of larger apartment weatherization projects across the city. There are specific criteria that have to be met in order to have that larger development be able to qualify for weatherization. It mostly is the construction of the buildings and the way that they're constructed, which would allow them to qualify or not qualify. And we also work with landlords on an individual basis. So we might have somebody where a tenant has applied or a tenant has reached out, and we reach out with landlords. We've also had conversations about weatherization with a number of our small developers within our small developers collective, and have reached out to them to explain the opportunities for weatherization as well. On the landlord side, the weatherization does require a financial contribution from the landlord towards some of the work. A lot of that would be around items that are eligible under weatherization, such as appliances or heating and ventilation and cooling, where the landlord would be responsible for 50% of the costs for those items as part of the overall weatherization work within the home. So we do small individual townhome landlord work all the way up to larger apartment style. And we've also over the years partnered with HABC in previous administrations also to weatherize some of the HABC properties as well.
Mr. Chair, I just have one follow-up for that question. Director, do you have a percentage breakdown, or do you have, or can you furnish the committee with a breakdown of how much we're spending for the weatherization program for landlords versus actual homeowners, or do you know that off the top?
I can get that for you. I can tell you that over the last 3 years, it would most likely be at least 95% homeowner and 5% landlord, at least.
Okay. If you can still just furnish the amount to the committees, I would greatly appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
So Councilwoman, that is a request, am I correct? Okay, I want to make
That
sure.
is correct.
Yes, somebody from the mayor's office here. Thank you. Councilman Burnett from the 8th District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and colleagues. So I wanted to start with a question around Service 747, which relates to registration and licensing of properties. One of the items in here was percentage of properties registered, and it was around 40%, which I know there's probably some COVID issues mixed in there, but wanted to know what the agency's doing. Because this is actually a question I've gotten a few times from residents around concerns about rental properties either not being licensed, and they were able to confirm that, and sort of wanting to know what happens if someone is found to have a rental that isn't registered, and two, just what direct oversight accountability is occurring to try and get that number up a little bit higher.
So we do any time, and I'll give a little bit of feedback, and then I'm going to ask Deputy Hessler to also respond to the question. So just a couple of items of note for this service right now. We do have some vacancies within the service that we're in the process of filling. So there's 4 vacancies with a total of 8 positions, and those are being filled currently as we speak. So that will also assist with some of those performance measures and getting the numbers up. I will say, I know that when we become aware of a rental property that is not licensed and registered, that we immediately take steps to work to get not only the appropriate citations in place for the landlord who has not registered or licensed that property, and also work with them to finalize their licensing and registration as well. At this point, I will ask Deputy Hessler to just step in and provide some additional information on some of the efforts that we take specifically to work with landlords to get them registered and licensed.
Just as a point of clarification for everyone that's listening, property registration is required for all non-owner occupied units in the city. That would include rentals, vacants, and just properties that are sitting and not owner occupied. But as of 2019, all rental units are required to be licensed, and that was not the case prior to 2019. Only multifamily dwellings had to be licensed. And so both those numbers, we do work.
How many ombudsmen do we have? Jason, Frankie, Andrea, who else?
Oh,
Eric, you're not
Eric,
muted.
please mute.
So for enforcement, we're working to get both those numbers up, but COVID did have an impact, mainly because existing licenses did not expire. They were extended under the governor's COVID order in relation to permits and licensing, and so that kind of threw all of our plans off as far as any sort of proactive enforcement activities. That hasn't completely stalled enforcement. We do, anytime we have to do any kind of investigation into a property to find out who the owner is, who's responsible for it, referrals from housing inspectors, we do that full workup. And if it's the property should have been licensed or registered and is not, citations are issued. Failing to license is $1,000 citation, and failing to register a vacant building is $500, and failing to register a otherwise habitable property is a $100 citation. So we do enforcement through that, but we are looking, once things kind of clear up a little bit more with COVID, to do more proactive enforcement, matching up different databases to our registration database, and finding people that should be licensed or registered, and issuing citations that way. We also think that once the courts open back up to a fuller percentage, and rental cases, failure to pay rent cases are moving forward faster, we'll see a significant uptick in both registration and licensing, because landlords need to be licensed in order to bring a failure to pay rent case in rent court. And so those that we're not reaching in other ways may be reached in that way. And so hope that answers the question.
No, it does. And I guess as you get closer to that more proactive model, I'll check back in on that. The second question, and this is actually not really a question, Mr. Chair, but just a data request about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Where would we find more information on which projects have been funded through the fund, like other maps? And excuse me if it's easily found online. I just had this as a note in my budget book to ask the question. I think you're muted, Director Kennedy.
My apologies. We do have a list of projects that have been funded. So we have the, in terms of the line item spending, I'll just give a very quick overview of some of the categories, and then we can provide the more detailed list of what's been committed. So we had the first round of ANOFA for the preservation of existing units and creation of new units for affordable housing. And there were four awardees, my apologies, made out of that first round, which would have been back in the fall of 2020. We've also completed our round of support for the Community Land Trust NOFA and made 3 awards for 3 community land trusts at $750,000 a piece for those. We also have the support for our older adults and hubs, a line item of $3 million that is now being programmed to support our housing upgrades to benefit seniors, which has also provided leverage to access an additional $4.5 million in support as well from the Weinberg Foundation and Keswick Foundation for the housing upgrades to benefit seniors. So we're starting to program that $3 million for that. And there will be a NOFA coming out within the next couple of weeks for another community land trust notice of funding availability. And we are in the process of reviewing the second NOFA for the preservation of and creation of new existing units and new units as well. And announcements should be made on those awards within the next 30 days. But we can provide you the list of the committed projects.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll look out for that. And those are my 2 questions, Mr. Chair. I'll hold my others for the next round.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Odette Ramos is on next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the agencies and everybody here. And of course, thank you to Deputy Commissioner. I mean, you've really taken everything and moved it very forward, particularly during the pandemic. I have many questions, but I'm obviously going to just do these first 2. One is you need more money. You just told Councilwoman Middleton that there's, a problem block in her. Every one of us has, problem blocks in our communities that we really need help with. And the answer has always been, unfortunately, that you've had to give us, I don't have any money. And so, I want to figure out ways, and this is a message for the administration and for finance, that we can really work hard to make sure that the blight elimination and the work that has to be done in our communities, particularly those who have been disinvested for so long, get that funding. I'm willing to work with you on how to figure it out, whether it's increasing our lending or whether it's doing something similar. I think we're in crisis mode now. We've been in crisis mode for a while. I want to get the tools, the money and the tools that we need to make this happen. So I'm just sort of stating that, for first off. Related to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, you had said that there's some money left over from 2021 that you will be using into 2022, and that you were sort of being conservative about transferring $7 million over to for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, just because we're not quite sure what the market is going to bear. How much is that money that's carrying over?
I would have to get you the exact figure because it's the appropriations. It's that would allow for the funding. So it's not actual hard money. It's the appropriations that would allow for us to collect the excise tax. So I have to finalize. It is around that $7 million mark, I believe.
So the 7 million is what we've collected already, that you've already seen, and that's what's going into 2021, because we don't have the final books about how much money the trust fund has collected.
Yeah, well, it isn't necessarily around, we don't have the final books because we just received our May numbers actually, which was a record. I will say we've just received May. We collected over $3 million for the fund in the month of May, which is fantastic. We do still anticipate that we will be below the projections of what the excess tax was projected to produce for the trust fund, which we all that were involved in kind of putting the trust fund together, we're expecting that the trust fund would be able to be supporting upwards of $12 to $15 million on a yearly basis to help support the overall fund to get it to the $20 million mark. We've been below that figure in terms of what we've been collecting over the last years from the excise tax. And we know that we will be below going into fiscal year 22. And the work with BBMR and our analysts was to right size the amount of appropriations needed for the fund. So it's not, it isn't the hard cash, it's the appropriations to allow us to collect the tax. And if Mara has another, she could provide some additional information on that.
I would only add that, I mean, again, a projection is a projection, right? Like it's an estimate of what we expect to collect in the excise tax. And what actually comes in, drives what is deposited into the funds, but we can follow up with the balance if that's useful.
Sure. So just, if, Mr. Chair, if I may, to be clear that we, the 7 million is a,
I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to follow up to get clarity.
Yeah, I'm just saying, make sure I want you to mention the request too, so we can make sure we get it clear.
Oh, good point. Sure. The request is just to get a balance for the collection of the trust fund of the excise tax, because I actually thought that because the market was doing so well that we'd actually be doing better. So I would like an analysis there. So the 7 million is basically a ballpark at this point because we just don't know how much that's going to be. Fine. And then we had signed, in my old position, signed a memo with the then administration about using bond funds to be able to get up to, I think for 2022, it was supposed to be about $5 million to be able to match in there. Is that in the capital budget that's going to be coming into the trust fund?
It is in the capital budget.
For $5 million?
For $5 million, yes.
Okay. Yep. That's my two questions for now. Thanks. I've got some more, but I'll wait. Thanks.
And I have a follow-up. Can we, on that request, can we find out actually where that money is going? What neighborhoods are they going to? Because I know that the money is supposed to be used for those distressed neighborhoods also. So that's a request from me. Can we get that request also? Thank you. Next, Councilman Yitzi.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Acting Director. I'm sorry we haven't had a chance to get together since you've been Acting Director, but I do want to thank your team, especially Stephanie has been great at facilitating with us. We all know Stephanie from her time on the council, from working on it with the City Council, and so she's been great to work with. And also my annual special shout out to Jason Hessler, who I always say is one of the best city employees that's out there, even though I disagree with him 99% of the time, but he's always very responsive and gives us the information that we need. So thank you, Jason, if you're on here. Oh, there you are. So I got a couple questions. This past year, we had a hearing on code enforcement. I don't know if you recall that. And so just to let you know, no one sent us any of the follow-up requests that we had from that hearing. And so there's a lot of like outstanding questions on that. But one of the most basic, simple things that was agreed to was to add email addresses onto the citations or notices that are given to people, so that not only do they have the inspectors like a generic phone number that never gets picked up because the inspectors are supposed to be out on the street, but to at least have an email address so that they can have a way to contact when they need clarity or something like that. Has that been done? Are there email addresses of the inspectors on these notifications?
I would need to follow up with Jason or Eric to ask about the status of implementation.
So does that mean it's not done, or are you just checking to see if it was done?
I'm checking on the implementation of that. Jason or Eric?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was done. It's not a individual inspectors, but instead it is a general account that can be checked by office staff. But I'll double check on that and get back to you.
Okay, so that email exists and somebody's checking it. Okay, I appreciate that. And then as far as like budget items, that's my second thing. Looking just at the different activities, and it's showing that activity 007, special investigations, has a reduction, while at the same time, the other items like activity 005, code enforcement has gotten a $700,000 bump. Now, one of the things that was pretty obvious at the hearing that we had, and just about every other hearing on this topic, is that the most critical thing is dealing with these bad actors, the repeat illegal dumpers, these people who are working on properties and just going backing up their truck, dumping, and going after those folks. And so that is done at the special investigations level. I believe that's Seth Greer and some people on his team that are following those cases. And with Jason, those are the cases that go to court and ones that actually have an impact. And so that activity we've said for a couple of years now has been shorthanded and could certainly use an increase in revenue, an increase in funding, so that they can follow more of those cases and go after more of those bad actors. Whereas what we found with the other output, when we look at the maintenance code for enforcement inspections, we're dealing with in the 200,000+ of these notices, and a lot of them are never even paid. A lot of them don't even turn into citations, and then the ones that are found to be violations and do get notices, a lot of them end up getting abated at the Environmental Control Board or other ways. And so we're not seeing a change in behavior. That is obvious. The same locations that have been problematic 5 years ago when I came into office are still problematic. Some of the people who keep things around their yards or do things that they shouldn't be doing, that have had code enforcement out there, they're still problematic. And so where we're seeing that impact is really on the special investigations piece. And so my question to you is, why has that been reduced? Even if it's reduced $1, why is that being reduced? And can there be a shift in taking some of those resources from that $700,000 increase in code enforcement and putting that towards the special investigations so that we can deal with these bad actors?
So I will get back to you on specific areas around the line item. I believe that some of the increases that occurred within the two, that part of the decrease in the special investigations, that's where potentially part of the savings that we realized in a couple of the different services as related to printing and some other items, where that came and was a line item. But I would need to go a little bit further into the exact line items, because I don't believe that the reduction for special investigations was a reduction as it relates to staff, but it was a reduction as related to other savings that we're seeing. And then also on the code enforcement side, allowing for the appropriations to be there for the CDBG funding support as well. And I will ask Mira to actually step in and also answer.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with your analysis. I mean, I think that the slight decrease in special investigations is obviously an administrative thing. It certainly does not reflect a reduction of manpower or anything along those lines. But the point I'm making and the question is, why is that number not going up? Why are we not adding additional resources to that specific line item? So I apologize for drowning that out with the slight administrative decrease on those things, but my question really is, why is this not a priority of your agency to increase that, to add additional investigators to that unit so that they can handle a larger caseload of these bad actors? Because there's no shortage of really bad actors.
No, and it is a priority of the agency to look at increasing special investigations unit. Jason and I talk about it on a regular basis. We know that we would need, including OPCs, on average between 79 to about 82,000 per position for that for those SIU investigators, and to be able to assist on that level. And then the work that they do also triggers the additional work for attorneys and paralegals as well. So we're looking at comprehensively what is needed across the board, because it starts even with cameras. We can get more cameras, and then we need more people doing this on the SIU team, and then we also need additional support on the paralegal and law side to take the prosecutions through. So this is something that we are evaluating and looking at. It is a priority for us at the agency in terms of putting forth, requests for additional funding to support these activities. And unfortunately, I think we are in a budget year with COVID impacts, and we were not able to realize those increases.
Well, I'm not looking to create additional spending on that. I'm just saying simply by the line items that are all part of that same package. Code enforcement and special investigations is basically in the same, it's in the same package there. And so all I'm saying is that, if that's something you guys are looking at, now is the opportunity, not to kick the can down the road for another year, because this has been going on for years, this conversation. And so I'm saying now is a good opportunity this year to take a stand and say, okay, our priority is to focus on, this component that has been working and has some really good outputs, and get them an additional team of people. And so, instead of spending $700,000 elsewhere, I think that can be spent a lot better by adding, an additional 5 people to that department. They're getting some cameras, allowing them with the equipment that they need to double their capacity by doing that, as opposed to putting it anywhere else that's just simply not having that same output.
Understood.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Porter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Acting Director Kennedy, I just wanted to echo other colleagues about Stephanie Murdoch. She is absolutely amazing. Also, Eric Booker is another amazing champion of housing. So I just want to elevate those 2 individuals. They have been extremely helpful in my days in District 10. So I have 2 particular questions. One related to the CB community block grants line, item 593, operating and capital grants to community-based nonprofits. My question to you all is, how many grants have been dispersed thus far to date? And do you all have a geographical analysis of where you all have dispersed those grants throughout the city?
Yes. So for CCG, which is our Community Catalyst Grant Program, which falls under 593, we do have a map, and we can provide that as follow-up. So I know I've made note of it, and I believe we're also making note of it in the chambers as well, so we can get all of the required follow-up information to you, so we can provide that. We we've only made 1 round of awards so far under CCG. We're actually getting very, very close to announcing the second round of awardees, which we anticipate to be happening in the next 2 to 3 weeks, which would increase. So off the top of my head, I believe on the operating side, there were in the first round were around 50 some awards that were made and a smaller amount of capital. And then we'll be announcing the next round, like I said, in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
No, thank you for that. And I assume that you all are working within the equity framework from the Department of Planning. I just want to make sure that we're not same grant opportunities to the same organizations. I'd love to see you all use that equity framework to ensure that communities that may not have the bandwidth or the capital to get these grants can get them for the most needed communities. My second question has to do with line 750. It is the lead hazard and reduction program. I have not heard much about that from you all with regard to the lead abatement program, and I'd love to see, or I'd love for you to share the strategies that you all are using with the city health department, because as we know, there's a correlation between lead poisoning and violence in our city. And so that justification right there, given our murder rate in this city, is even more incentive for us to really ramp up efforts in this particular program, particularly not even in the residential perspective, but also in the school-based and commercial perspective as well.
So our DHCD's lead hazard reduction program is specifically funded through HUD, through their lead hazard reduction grants. We have been impacted over the last year with COVID with a number of different things in terms of implementing the program as it relates to contractors being able to be inside houses and so forth. The program is also specifically supports lead hazard reduction work in homes where children are under the age of 6. So we are limited in the homes that we work in. And we do have a very strong and robust relationship with the health department. They're actually one of our sub-grantees on the grant from HUD, and we work closely with them to identify properties where we would enter into grant agreements to perform the lead hazard reduction work. We also prioritize residents who have an elevated blood level, and we also look to be proactive in addressing areas where historically there has been a high blood level, or where we know that there's a historic level of both deteriorating properties and families with children, so that we can proactively reach families before children actually realize a elevated blood level, because we don't want to be entirely reactive. We want to be proactive as well in our work.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. But I just want to caveat, you're still missing a large percentage of young people, 6 maybe to 18, that are potentially living in homes. And so are there any other grant opportunities, whether it be through HUD or at the state level, whereby we are actively assessing kind of lead levels for that age group that is outside of the regulations sponsored by HUD?
So HUD does not have another program that looks at over the age of 6. We do work with the state to work. They do have a lead hazard reduction program that they administer, and we actually process applications. So if something comes in and it is would be eligible for the state lead hazard reduction loan program that they run, we would work with a family to work with them to get them into that program. It has limited funding available, so it is definitely highly competitive, and it's an area that the state has been looking at increasing funds for. But the focus across the board from the state, the federal government, and local government has been on the ages of 6 and below, because of the highest risk that exists for those children.
Sure. And so, correction, you mentioned a loan program. So the program for ages 6 and over is a reimbursement loan program as opposed to our grant program. So that would theoretically opt out all low income or any type of low income community or family that could potentially use this
It,
program or are in need of this particular program. Is that correct?
no, because it's actually the state program is geared still for low to moderate income households on the lead side.
Do you have that income that program like?
I believe it's 80% AMI and below.
80% EMI. So most low income communities are at least 130 FPL. So you're still missing a large, considerable amount of people. Okay.
No, oh no, I completely understand. I completely understand your question, and unfortunately, at this time, the funding sources that we have available to us are specific to the 80% and below AMI and 6 years and younger, where the majority of the funding exists, and then whatever the state has in terms of eligibility for their additional lead hazard reduction program that they administer.
Sure. No, thank you so much for clarifying, and thank you for all your work. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Real quick, I'm gonna go in this order. Chair Costello, then Councilman Dorsey, Councilman Torrance, then Councilman Conway, then Councilman Z. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a whole slew of people to thank at DHCD, which I'll do at the end after everyone's asked their questions. I think this is for Booker and Hessler. And I think I know the answer to this, but just help me walk through this scenario. If there's a vacant property that is privately held and needs to be boarded up on the first floor, and needs to have the grass cut because it's above, I think, 8 inches or whatever city code is, that property is in violation of 2 different city codes. So HCD would presumably issue citations for both of those 2 issues, and then pass that along to DPW, who would come and 1, board up the property, and 2, cut the grass. So that's the first part. Do I have that correct?
You said privately owned, but is it a vacant building or is it just privately owned? Privately owned vacant?
Privately owned vacant building that presumably has a VBN.
Councilman, you are correct.
All right, and DPW would cut the grass, et cetera?
Yes, we placed a work order on the location. DPW will cut the grass and board as needed.
And then the citation that's issued, that would go to the whatever address the property owner has in real property, correct?
Actually, at the point where there is a vacant building notice on it, we are looking at it from a vacant building space. And what we're trying to do there is get the vacant building back in the market. So the citation that would be issued at that point is a $900 citation for owning a vacant building. Privately owned properties that are occupied, they are the recipients of the other citations to nudge them to cut their grass.
And what's that, Deputy Commissioner Booker, what's that other citation? So if that's a privately owned occupied property, what's the citation for those 2 things?
That's a $50 citation.
Okay, got it. And then, okay, I think I'm good for now, but I'm probably going to come back when it gets back around to me because I want to ask a couple more questions on that scenario. I just need to chew on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you. Thanks, DHCD. You all are great. Just one thing I'll note that I think is really a joy for me is I lead bike rides around my district periodically, and one of the things I try to point out to folks along these rides is when we pass by houses where I know that my office has worked with DHCD to have notices issued and then properties pushed into receivership, and where we can see that those properties have turned around directly as a result of DHCD's work. There's one that's just a beautiful example of that on Parkside Drive that I get to pass by on a pretty frequent basis. where it sat for years and years and years until DHCD got really involved in pursuing a vacant building notice and the failure to abate and the whole receivership process. And you know, it's been renovated now and just looks great. So just I think that's just an incredibly invaluable service for the city. And one of my questions has to do kind of directly with how we can improve on what we already have going. I pretty routinely find that properties have had a notice issued to them sometime in the past, and where the problem was never abated, and there has never been a fine issued for failure to abate, which I know we can I don't know if it's in all cases, maybe we can speak to this, but there is a hefty like $900 fine for a failure to abate. I don't know if that's specific to a VBN or whether that's all other notices. But in general, just like what would it cost? I mean, this is a budget hearing. What would it cost in order to be able to follow up on every notice that goes out to issue failure to abate citations, and for DHCD to have the capacity to take next steps and all of the available subsequent steps on those properties without my office and other council offices having to dig in and bring it to DHCD's attention that, here's a problem property, and oh, by the way, it looks like,
Sure. So, Councilman, I think you're ready for a response to that. Thank you for your question, and let me just talk about the linear progression of a notice. So you talked about the failure to abate, which we call FTA. The $900 citation is, as you stated, strictly for vacant buildings, but other notices, the failure to abate citation is $250. So at the beginning of the linear progression, my folks go out, they do the inspection, they either issue a notice of citation if a violation is found, and then when we follow up as we are working with whoever the owner is, we try to work them towards a solution without being punitive. And when we get to the end of that linear progression for our portion of it, we usually issue a failure to abate citation for a notice other than a vacant building. Once we have issued the failure to abate notice, we make the decision as to whether or not that's something that needs to be sent to legal. Because at that point, we've done everything that's within our toolbox to try to get this person to correct their behavior. Once we've issued them the failure to abate citation, at that point is a decision as to whether or not we want to spend legal resources to try to get this behavior to shift. And at that point, I'll just pause, because that's where my colleague Jason Hessler picks up with the legal piece.
Yeah, with the legal piece, we have the capacity in-house. We currently file 400 to 500 receiverships a year on vacant buildings. With some efficiencies, we would be able to kick that up to around 700 with the current staffing. The limitations exist in actually obtaining title, and then with the court, and then beyond that, you're having a buyer at the other end. We could file a receivership case on every vacant building in the city, but if there's not somebody there that's interested in purchasing it and has the resources to rehab it, filing the case is useless. Same thing with issuing a $900 failure to abate citation. If the individual on the other end doesn't have an arm to twist, twisting the arm doesn't help. So we've got some larger systemic problems that the agency and the city addresses through development and through demolition and through other strategies outside of receivership.
I guess my first concern in this question is just ensuring that even if you try to work to provide a non-punitive resolution, for every, one or two instances where I, by chance, come across the fact that a notice has been issued and the violation not abated, sometimes long ago, for every one or two that I happen to stumble across, I have to believe that there are exponentially more that I don't ever, cast my eyes on. And that's my concern, is that something happens that those cases don't ever have every available measure taken. I mean, I sent three over to Seth, I sent three over to Seth Greer last week, where they were all commercial properties, liquor stores that are in zoning violations, and all of them had outstanding violations. And so I just need to, know what it would take. If it's a capacity issue, if it's a funding capacity issue, to be able to have a system in place that no property is going to fall by the wayside in having every step taken possible. So, yeah, I mean, if there's a request in this, it's for that information. What is the fund, what is the additional funding that DHCD needs to ensure that every single time, we're not missing that opportunity.
And Councilman, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. You are talking about notices that go beyond the vacant building notice. You're just talking about notices in general. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so with respect to the $250 citation for notices that we issue that are not vacant building notices, that for me, that's just a matter of me making some adjustments operationally. What I've tried to do is get my inspectors to work with people to a resolution, but they have over 30,000 notices that they are revisiting every year. I can make some operational shifts in that space that doesn't have a budget impact. It's just a operational shift. And at that point, I'll yield, Jason, if you have something to add.
No, I think I understand the request there, and we can follow up with that.
Thank you both. My second
Councilman,
question is about, I know that we're focused on the operating budget here, but there's something of particular interest to me that was in the department's CIP request. Alice, I brought this up with you a while ago, and I know this is kind of your brainchild, about a revolving loan fund for low cost home purchases. We have a lot of people that are paying a lot out of pocket for rent in homes that they could easily afford to buy if they could get a loan from a bank, but the home value is so low that a bank doesn't see it as profitable enough to make the loan, and so they won't make the loan, say for $45,000 or $50,000 for a house in, say, Curtis Bay or Brooklyn. There was a CIP request made by DHCD to establish a fund that could be used to make those level loans to people to help them get into home ownership. And by the way, because banks won't make these loans, the only people who then end up being able to buy those properties are landlords with huge cash reserves, who then jack up the rent to twice what the mortgage payment would be for a mortgage holder. Was that approved for funding in the CIP this year? And can you talk about this a little bit and how much it is and how you plan for it to work?
So yes, the low income mortgage program was approved for funding in the CIP this year. I believe that we ended up with $400,000 dedicated to the program, which is not enough to meet potentially what we have as a need, but we do estimate that we will be able to serve a number of residents, providing funding and mortgages that would be between one of the target areas that we're looking at is between kind of $40,000 to $60,000 for that mortgage price, and sometimes it could be a little bit less as well. And there is additional funding that we have to help support that with down payment and closing cost assistance, and not only looking at the mortgage, but having it be flexible in terms of underwriting terms that would allow for alternative forms of credit and breaking down some of the barriers that we know exist for our low income residents across the city that are interested in becoming homeowners, and to have an opportunity, like you said, where they could purchase a home maybe that they're renting currently for $1,200 a month or $1,300 a month, where they're scraping to get by month to month, but we're able to have them end up purchasing that property for around $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, which would drastically reduce their overall housing cost burden for them. So this is an area that is something I've been working on for a number of years previous to being in the role of acting commissioner, but was a priority for me as deputy commissioner in homeownership and housing preservation. And we'll continue to look for resources to fund that program at a higher level.
I just think this is such a brilliant idea. I think this is so important. I mean, if we're, if we're cutting those people's monthly housing costs in half or whatever, that I think that this program will help do. I mean, we're talking about people at an income level where that money is not, that savings is not just going to sit in a bank. This is people that are still living paycheck to paycheck. That's money that's going to end up going right back into our local economy as well, not just into the pockets of some Texas property owner or whatever. So just congratulations to you for getting this to where it is. I'll be curious to know like what the life cycle of repayment looks like in order for that money to circle back in and be able to be re-lent out.
Councilman, is that a request?
It's just a prompt for a later conversation, I would
Okay.
say. That just looking forward to that, and please let us know what you need in order to get that funding level raised, or continuously funded in subsequent CIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Real quick before Councilman Torrance, you get on, I just wanted to, Deputy Housing Commissioner, I've been talking about legacy residents, and that's what we're talking about. I'm sure my colleague talking about the same thing, because we want to make sure our legacy renters become legacy homeowners. So I would, along with, I'm sure the rest of my colleagues, will make sure we try to get some more funding for that program, because $400,000 is just like a drop in a bucket. So just wanted to let you know, I'll work with my colleagues to make sure we get some more funding for that program. Councilman Torrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Acting Commissioner Kennedy. I just want to thank your team for the work that they provided, especially with the town halls and the other supports they provided the 7th District. It's been very helpful during my transition. I have several questions. First is 752, questions about the projected loss, especially for the fact that we're still in COVID-19, and I have had several fires where persons have actually lost their homes, assistance in coordinating with that, as well as emergencies that are happening. Are we projecting emergencies to go down, or are we trying to be flexible? I just want to know why the cost is going.
So for Service 752, we're actually, one item with that service is actually aligning with additional resources that we have in the agency that have previously not been leveraged and utilized. So we're aligning services within 752 as it relates to providing supports with our ombudsman that are now kind of falling and helping in working through with Deputy Commissioner Booker on our emergency response, and also then on our human services side, working with our our light intake and assessment unit to also be able to leverage resources. So one item that we recognize is that some of the work within that service was kind of acting within a silo, and we wanted to break down those silos and be able to leverage additional resources and grant support across the other services that we have within the agency as it relates to being able to provide support for home repair after, for a furnace or other items and things along those lines.
So this is just, so we are leveraging the decrease in other areas of the agency to sustain things that we've seen a new need in.
Correct. And we did not reduce staff or we didn't reduce staff in that service or anticipate it in terms of our ability to still continue to provide the service, because the other item is that some of the funding supports needed to provide the services such as community outreach services in terms of Service 752 would often also get phone calls about furnaces or no heats outside of just the emergency side. And we're aligning those because we have a funding service for furnaces and no heat through weatherization, and also being able to still maintain the level of service. So we are not reducing services. We are not necessarily looking at saying that we have a projection that there'll be less emergencies coming up within the year, but we're still being able to support residents within that, especially on the emergency side, with assistance with relocation and leveraging funding with Red Cross and so forth to provide emergency housing support as well.
Question, since this line item also supports witness intimidation, is this being leveraged across the state's attorney's office as well in BPD? I just want to make sure, because that is a concern.
It is leveraged with the state's attorney's office. Actually, that's where the funding support comes from for this service. Yeah.
Okay, and then my other piece is related to code enforcement. One of the things that I've had from conversations with you guys is that a lot of our agents do not work at night unless it's a special detail or weekends. Is there any way that we can get there? Whether is it an additional financial cost? Is it a staffing or realignment that we need to have occur? Because what I'm finding with not only illegal dumping, but other incidents where I have persons doing illegal unpermitted work at night, they're carrying when we don't have staff to support it. And it's often something that has been burdened that has been sent over to BPD. So is there a way that we can leverage staffing wise in our current budget concerns to actually address those issues that happen at nights and weekends?
I don't know that on our current staffing levels that we would be able to do that. We do provide some level of service on night and weekends through our special investigations unit, specifically on our social club task force work and other areas that does not align with the issue of illegal dumping. But I would say that I can go back and speak with Deputy Booker and Deputy Hessler to see what opportunities may exist. But I would say that just intuitively, based on the budget, based on our staffing levels and where we are, that it would take some work to try to reorganize to have staff out in the evening. Also, that would also require, I believe, a different level of some training and safety protocols and measures to be put in place that our staff are just not equipped for, and we would need to explore those options as well. So I can commit that we can go back and evaluate that and have that as part of a follow-up conversation. But the current levels, it would be difficult to do that. We would need additional support for additional staff members to have a full and robust evening crew and task force related specifically for illegal dumping or other code enforcement issues.
Deputy Kennedy, if I may add to your comments. First, I want to agree that we would need some additional support because even in the emergency space, we have reacted to over 320 fires thus far this year. and they work on a 24-hour basis, and they do their full-time job during the day, and they're on 24-hour callback. While the inspectors are on 24-hour callback, we would have to adjust our operation to support a nighttime operation, and it would probably take some additional funding and personnel, because as I currently stand in the emergency management space with the ombudsman, I would say that based on my analysis and experiences with them, since the emergency side is reporting into me, I would say that we are short personnel, but we do the best with what we have, because we in fact have the full-time day job in addition to the 24-hour responsibility. So as Acting Commissioner Kennedy has stated, we probably would, let's take a look at it as some things we could probably do operationally. However, there's also some additional budget support that we would need to make that a reality.
Thank you. That's helpful, because one of the things that I've noticed from just going across the board with agencies and seeing flexibility, we do have some contractual requirements for just the classification of our staff, and be mindful of that. But also, I understand that we have that unfortunate thing that we have to think about is overtime, especially if we're going beyond those hours. So I'm thankful that you guys are willing to be flexible and figure out some type of solution or some type of flex for it. Because one of the things is that I get the calls. I mean, many of my colleagues get those calls. If you hear someone doing work at night at 7 o'clock at night, you're like, what's that banging? And there's no one to respond otherwise than BPD. And the only thing they will do is say, we'll report to code enforcement and let them know that we heard it. But if that officer doesn't tell you what they exactly saw, what you've done, then how can we issue a stop work order if we don't know what's happening, or we're not trained properly to do that? So I'm just mindful of the fact that we need to think differently. Especially, I have one person in my district who, I'm violating your rule, Mr. Chair, who had someone doing foundation work at night. And your house is shaking at 9 o'clock at night. And the only thing that the officer can say is that, I'm sorry, I'll call code enforcement. They'll come out in the morning. And that foundation work is not happening the next morning. But you see that the dirt was excavated. And that can be easily explained with, like, I may have plumbing issues. Don't know. The other question I have is explicitly for illegal dumping. If we cannot have agents out at night, can we have agents who are monitoring those cameras at night and alerting BPD when an illegal dumping is actively occurring? Because what I'm finding is that I'm having it happen often in many of my Black and brown communities at night, and regardless of lighting now, that they're happening. So how do we have that assistance then and there?
I would defer to Deputy Hessler to provide some feedback on that. I think that goes again to that we would need to evaluate some of the operational aspects. We have there are over 70 cameras deployed across the city, and they're on a rotational basis with the number of staff members that we currently have. I think we're around 12 staff members in SIU. And I also want to remind council members as well that the SIU team not only is only focused on illegal dumping and managing those cameras, but they also serve many other supportive roles to our legal team as it relates to process serving, investigations for other components to our legal work, and supporting the legal team on receiverships and zoning violations, etc. So we would need to go back and I would again say same answer as regards to the code enforcement, that I can evaluate that with Deputy Hessler, look at what could be possible in terms of a change in process at this point, but then also what additional resources would be needed to support nighttime activity. One area to remember too, 311, I believe, takes calls until 10 p.m. So that's something that we'd have to look at across the board to see how best to make some of these changes work so that information is flowing and efforts are concentrated, and we're able to achieve outcomes with potential changes and implementation as being suggested.
As far as illegal dumping, anytime illegal dumping is occurring, and somebody witnesses it and sees it happening, that is always a 911 call. That is not a 311 call. It is not a housing response, because our inspectors are not police officers. They are not special police officers. They do not, carry any kind of weapons or have any sort of training to deal with that, possible confrontation. And they don't have arrest powers. So all of our materials, all of our training, everything has always been, if you see dumping in progress, call 911, then follow up with that 311 complaint where you provide that information that you've called 911. And when that happens, we do follow up with the police officers and we help do the follow-up investigation based off of whatever information they've gathered. If they've seized a vehicle, if they've made any arrests, and then our attorneys will get those cases actually transferred to housing court to prosecute those. We can definitely discuss offline and further possibilities or things that you're seeing and how we can better address those. I would just encourage people, like, if they see dumping occur, get as much information as possible from a safe location and get that information to 911 and then follow up with 311.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys' honesty, and I'm going to yield back to the chair on this.
Thank you, Councilman. Chairman Conway, before you start, I just got one question while we're on it. This is for Commissioner Booker and our acting housing commissioner. I was listening to Commissioner Booker talk about when they go out to do the vacant notice on a particular property, board, and cut the grass. Have we ever discussed to just put that all in one shot, maybe with Commissioner Booker? So when they go do the board and piece, they can do the cutting the grass instead of referring it. And then you hear people, community saying, oh, they closed it because it went over to DPW. Could we have a conversation, talk about how do we kind of put that all together, and then that responsibility would fall under, I guess, Commissioner Booker, but he'll have the resources and the staff. So when they make their call about the vacant property and the grass cut, when they board up the house, they can cut the grass at the same time. I mean, it just makes a lot of sense, and you can take all the resources you have and put them in the shop. Just, I think, a conversation we need to have.
So I'll take this one and just state that we are evaluating all different options in terms of how to create efficiencies within the process. This is something that is broader than just us here at DHCD. CAO Shorter and our deputy mayors, as well as the new director of DPW, have a focus on looking at the processes and efficiencies and where we have room for improvement. And I will say that we will be having those discussions not only on the administration side across agencies, but also, involving, I know this is an issue that has come up from a number of different council members, and we're, actively having those conversations as well. So it is on our list, and we're going to be having fruitful conversations, I believe, with the administration, Director Mitchell, and so forth, to find some solutions there.
Okay, real quick, Chairman Costello, you have a question?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Be very quick. Booker and Hessler, back to our scenario from before. So is a $50 citation, do you think that's, is that effective in your experience? I'm not suggesting it's not.
Councilman, I would react to that question in this way. It depends on where the citations are in fact being issued. In our, I would think that where we have homeowner population and you issue a citation, they react to that citation. Where we have communities that are transient in nature and they're trying to figure out how to survive, they probably don't react to the $50 citation as quickly as the homeowner population. That has been my experience.
Okay. Or Jason, you have anything to add, or are you good with that?
No, I agree with that. I think it depends on the situation, and it frees up personnel and time, where some things can be addressed as simple as issue a $50 citation, and other things need additional inspector work or a pattern and practice case or something else from the litigation team. So it's not the only tool in the toolbox, but it's one of those things that it can be and is effective depending on the situation, and then it escalates from there.
Okay, and remind me, once a citation is issued, the property owner has 10 days to abate on both boarding and on tall grass?
Citations are issued on grass, weeds, and trash, and that would be 10 days before we would come back and issue a second citation or take other action. Boarding is based off a vacant building notice, so most properties already have that notice, and so if an inspector sees it, they create the work order to have it boarded, and then that cost gets passed on to the property owner.
Okay.
It's only in those situations where it's a brand new vacant where it would be a 5-day hold before the work order kicks in.
So on the tall grass item, yesterday was June 1st, so I get issued a citation on June 1st. I have until June 11th to abate. Booker, one of your inspectors, comes out on June 12th and says, oh, Eric didn't do what he was supposed to do. They issue another citation on the spot.
Yeah, we'll issue another citation on the spot because we have to wait for the 10 days to pass before we can issue number 2. That's correct.
And what's the second citation? 50?
It's still the second citation is a $50 citation. That's correct.
And just walk me through the escalation on that.
Well, if it's a location that we continue to circle back to and issue $50 citations, there's no monetary increase, but we get to a point where we would say we can't correct this behavior, so I'll punt it over to my colleague Jason Hessler, who I call the Hammer, and he can make a decision as to whether or not he wants to do a pattern in practice on a particular property. Jason, anything to add there?
No, I'm good with that.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Booker and Deputy Commissioner Hammer. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your question, Councilman. Appreciate you. Good seeing you.
Okay, Chair Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. First, I want to thank Commissioner Kennedy for coming out to my district a couple of weeks ago and helping out with the home repair workshop. We had a great turnout and also got a lot of questions answered. My first question actually has a little bit to it has to do with some of what we learned from that workshop. So this is a question regarding service 738 and 750, so weatherization services and housing rehabilitation services. So I understand there's a massive wait list for the LIGHT program. And this program, of course, is really important to strengthen middle neighborhoods. What does it take to meet the need for home repair and weatherization? I know with that backlog and then understanding what we may need going forward.
True. So we do have a significant wait list as it relates to our intake. So our LIGHT is our intake and assessment unit that assists residents with the single application that can help guide them to the services they need, whether or not it be housing rehab work, weatherization, or lead hazard reduction work, and also look for efficiencies across those so we can leverage funding for all three. We are at our overall wait list over 1,200. I believe it's close to 1,200 residents right now. There are about 500 residents on that wait list are over the age of 65. And we will be assisting members of that wait list with the additional funding that we have that was announced last week by Mayor Scott with the $3 million from the trust fund for older adult home repair and leveraging that with the funding from Weinberg and Keswick as well to support hubs. So with being able to have the funding in place that supports the older adults, that opens up our CDBG funding, which is CDBG is the main source of funds for our housing rehabilitation work. And then we also have around $750,000 in CIP funding from general obligation bonds that supports the housing rehabilitation work as well. we understand and know that that does not scratch the surface in terms of what is needed on a yearly basis in order to meet the needs for the housing repair, not just in our middle neighborhoods, but also our lower income neighborhoods. I often talk about how, you know, around $10 million a year would help us to be able to move through some of those repairs in a, you know, a more efficient way, especially as it relates to roofing repair, which we know the roof is the Achilles, especially a flat roof in Baltimore, is an Achilles heel of a Baltimore row home. And if we don't get to the roof, then it starts to impact the other systems within the house and overall health of the home as well. So we understand the need and continue to advocate and look for ways to take the funding that we do have and leverage it with other resources to be able to provide the services. And we do prioritize the wait list so that we try to get to most vulnerable adults, older adults, families with young children, extremely pressing emergent situations as well.
Thank you. And so just to sort of throw in on the answer to that question, you said roughly $10 million a year would help
And
us,
that,
one, dig ourselves out of the hole and
yeah,
prepare us going forward.
and that would be on the housing rehabilitation side. The weatherization services is 100% funded through state and federal grant funding. And the changes that we've made in funding for weatherization will increase the staffing capacity. So we'll be seeing an increase in the weatherization service numbers over the next 2 years, and that will increase as well with available funding from the state and federal government.
Okay. Thank you. The other question I have is around Service 742, promoting homeownership. So does ACD have an idea where the folks are purchasing homes through these incentive programs, and how do incentive buyers, excuse me, how do we incentivize buyers to purchase homes outside of the white L? We know those parts of the city tend to do better than other parts of the city. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I definitely can. So in terms of 742 and the Office of Homeownership, one of the things that I want to highlight is that we have over 55% of the incentives are provided to low and moderate income home buyers. And also we are regularly able to increase the number of affordable homeownership sales that we facilitate as well, which the majority of those being outside of the white L and in our middle income neighborhoods across the city. So we do have information on that, and we can also provide a map. We do map on a yearly basis all of the homeownership incentives across the program. So we have our Buying into Baltimore incentive, which is administered in partnership with Live Baltimore and Annie Milley and her team. We have our Live Near Your Work program, which is leveraged with a number of different businesses across the city to support living near their work and their place of business, as well as our city employee homeownership incentive, our Vacants to Value homeownership incentive, and our CDBG homeownership incentive, which specifically serves our low and moderate income households.
Are we finding that folks stack up those incentives programs, or that people pick
They
and choose?
do. It depends on their buying situation and what they're interested in. And sometimes we do see one or two programs. There may be a CDBG incentive stacked with a Live Near Your Work grant. Home buying incentive on CDBG is a 5-year forgivable loan, and the Live Near Your Work is up to that $2,000 grant amount. And sometimes we see those coupled together. We've also seen a CDBG homeownership incentive coupled with a city employee homeownership incentive. So we're particularly interested in those in terms of supporting our city employees becoming homeowners as well in that low to moderate income bracket too.
Awesome. Good to hear. And also really glad to see the tax sale exemption program being implemented. So thank you, guys. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Cohen. I want to recognize Councilman Bullock also that's on the call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Kennedy. Just want to say, you stepped in a really tough time for the city, and just appreciate the able job that you and your staff have done, keeping things afloat. And, so thank you for that. Given where we are in the pandemic, given that the governor just announced we're going to opt out of some of the federal support for unemployment, given that the moratoria on evictions will end soon, and there are a lot of people with a lot of back rent. I think we, like many places in America, may well be staring down the barrel of an affordable housing crisis and of an eviction crisis. Can you talk a bit about where you all are in position to deal with it? Like, what are the supports that are in place, and how are we thinking about this next 6 months as we emerge from COVID-19?
So there are a couple things. One, the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success is the lead agency as it relates to the city's eviction prevention work, and we still have funding available through the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success to provide financial assistance to residents that will be facing eviction. I want to make that widely known that funds are there and robust funding to be able to support that effort on the financial side. From DHCD standpoint, we're supportive of those efforts. We actually have a very robust working relationship with them in terms of referrals and information that we get in through our light intake and assessment, because people contact us not just for home ownership issues, but also on the rental side. So we have that referral in place. We're also in the process of implementing the right to counsel legislation and have a work group that is set up with DHCD as well as our nonprofit partners in terms of looking at increasing the efforts around right to counsel. We have some funds that have been dedicated to right to counsel through our CDBG COVID-related funding sources. We're looking at additional funding opportunities to increase right to counsel as we move into these next several months, where we believe that we could be facing eviction crisis and affordable housing crisis as well, on top of the affordable housing crisis that already exists in our city, which is a difficult, as you said, like barrel of a gun to be facing down. We are also in the process with another working group putting together plans for foreclosure prevention program as well, to assist with specifically low-income residents who have had a COVID impact, who may be facing foreclosure, and working through them both through financial assistance as well as assistance in terms of coaching and so forth for being able to look at options as it relates to refinancing or restructuring their mortgage and what assistance they need. So we are taking multiple different approaches and working with partners across both city agency partners and our nonprofit partners and advocates as well with the resources that we have, and also evaluating additional resources for these programs and putting them on our table for ARPA funds to support as well.
Yeah, follow up on that. Appreciate that. And the ARPA funds also, I mean, the Affordable Housing Trust funds, are we utilizing, leveraging though? I mean, I know there are specific purposes and land banks and all that good work, but are they like commingled into sort of this effort as well, or not so much?
No, they are. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund actually adjusted the spending plan last spring, early summer during the pandemic, and dedicated $2 million of the spending line, and actually had to adjust the spending plan in general because of the lower projections on the excise tax. And in doing so, they also created a new line item that was specific to pandemic eviction prevention and provided $2 million And we have an MOU with MOCFS because that is part of the pot of funds that the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success has available to them to provide financial assistance for eviction prevention.
Great. Thank you for that. My second question is related to illegal dumping. We, the council, obviously this is a major concern across all our districts. You've heard it from probably every single one of us. We just passed legislation to double the fines on illegal dumping. You spoke a little bit earlier about efficiencies as it relates to code. I know that Councilman Torrance and I have been really pushing to consolidate some of the inspectors because we know there's a huge backlog of illegal dumping requests, and there's a lot of misses between DHCD and DPW, where maybe DHCD comes in, issues the fine, maybe not, but the handoff often gets confused. So we had asked in a previous hearing and hadn't heard much about either moving inspection back into DPW, and I know Administrator Shorter is on this call as well, or would just love to know from you what some of those efficiencies and improvements that you're looking at are, because I think there's just a lot of frustration among residents of Baltimore about the amount of unaddressed illegal dumping in our city.
Understand, and we've discussed this before as well, and I am as equally frustrated with the amount of trash that exists in illegal dumping within our communities. Some of the different areas in terms of what we've looked at, I have had some conversations with Deputy Commissioner Booker in terms of some efficiencies that could be had there based on a pilot that was done several years ago between the two agencies. I will say that the fine, whether or not it is illegal dumping or illegally placed trash, because there is differences between some of those as well. But we are out issuing the citations and putting that in, and then the responsibility at DHCD is we issue the citation and take care of that from the citation standpoint, and then potentially if there is opportunity for SIU to have the investigation, but we always put in that work order for DPW. So the work order goes in as a separate item within, it's an internal 311 item that goes in, and that goes over to DPW to perform the cleaning of the alley or the cleanup for the illegal dumping. Eric, Deputy Commissioner Booker, and I have had a conversation about looking at what it would look like to have potentially a DPW crew with our inspectors on that side, so that then things are getting picked up even if it isn't illegal dumping, because we want to make sure that the investigation can happen. And there are other items like that we're putting together on the table to bring to CAO Shorter and Deputy Mayor Carter as they're looking across all of the agencies in terms of where efficiencies are and what items can be addressed to have some changes to help ensure that we get things cleaned up across the city. And as you know, DPW has been one of the most challenged agencies during the pandemic, and definitely have a backlog in terms of cleaning and so forth. And so one of our thoughts that we want to bring to CO Shorter and Deputy Mayor Carter is what can we do on the agency side to assist in DPW. So if we have somebody that's capable of driving a load packer or a truck, can we have that be part of our route and include that versus putting the onus on DPW to be entirely responsible for the cleanup. So we are looking at and evaluating different things, and I know that CEO Shorter is leading the charge for this across all of the agencies.
No, I definitely appreciate that. Look forward to further update on that regard. And I just know that at a structural systems level, there are misses that are happening too frequently. And so, it's just an issue that we got to figure out better efficiencies for. Again, want to thank you and want to reiterate Councilmember Ramos's point that you all need more money because clearly you're doing a lot with not enough. So again, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Real quick before we go to Councilman Bullock, I just have a question for you, Deputy Commissioner, about the hubs. I know Councilman Conway said something about the weatherization. Is that the same thing? Because I know you have a waiting list for the hubs also.
So the numbers that I shared for Councilman Conway are the same numbers. So we
Okay.
have around just under 1,200 on our total wait list, and out of those 1,200, there's around 497 or 498. I may be off by one or two that are 65 and older that will be serviced through hubs, housing upgrades to benefit seniors, with the funding that was just announced last week.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Bullock.
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Don't have a direct question, but a couple of comments. I do just appreciate all the work of DHCD. I get to interact with you quite frequently in all your different capacities. Just want to say that your efforts around marshaling some of the funds, whether they be local funds or state funds, and also looking at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, I think you're really doing some awesome work. We do know that illegal dumping is a challenge, and we understand that it's something, particularly in the 9th District, that affects us very acutely. We've had a lot of conversations around vacant housing, and also how we can utilize some of those resources as it relates to demolition as well. So again, I know that you have your hands full. I just want to say I appreciate you guys being some great partners, your leadership as commissioners and deputy commissioners, and just really just doing the awesome work of Baltimore City. So again, just thank you for the work you're doing. I know we have so much more work ahead of us as we try to cut down on the vacant housing, cut down on illegal dumping, and work together as a team. So thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Last but not least, Chairman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Booker and Hammer, got one more question for you guys. So in that scenario we were talking about on day 11, does code enforcement always come out on day 11, or is there something that triggers that? How does that work?
Councilman, the answer is no, not always exactly on day 11. The difference between a citation and a notice is a notice populates a reinspection date. A citation does not populate a reinspection date on the inspector's calendar. Is monetary in nature, punitive, corrective is the desire, but it does not populate a reinspection on day 11. If we issued a notice, that would populate their calendar for a reinspection on day 11. So the inspector has the choice, depending upon what the situation is, to issue the citation if it's a one-off, or to issue a notice. Usually what the practice is of the inspector, if they've issued a citation once and then they circle back and it's the same person, they'll issue them another citation. And now if they circle back and they come through again and they see them a third time, they'll issue a notice. Now, the reason that they would issue a notice at that point is because if they don't correct it, they can issue a failure to abate, which now is a $250 citation. So the inspector uses the tools that they have in their arsenal. They look to see who their bad actors are. And if they keep coming back to a place and they know that the $50 citation didn't remedy it, and they try it again or try to make contact, the last resort is to issue that notice and try to hit them with a $250 failure to abate citation. So that's the way that works. And if we have a pattern, then we reach over to the Hammer and ask him to take a look at it to see if he wants to move it into a pattern and practice case.
Got it. That's very helpful. Is there a way that we could get a one pager or less? Maybe it's a couple bullet points, maybe it's a graphic, outlining that process. And, if this kind of an if P then Q, like if this happens, then you get the $900 fine. But if it's this scenario, you get the 50. And then if this, 50 again, or if this, then it goes to 250, kind of outlined in those steps, and something that we could share with the communities we represent. Because I think folks would be very interested to hear that you have these tools available to you in the toolbox. Sometimes they're used, sometimes they're not. Oftentimes we're given discretion to our inspectors, which is, I think what I'm hearing you say, correct?
That is correct. And the other thing that we are starting to embrace, Councilman, is looking at code enforcement through an equity lens. And that's a little bit challenging because sometimes we don't always know who's on the other side of the citation. It could be 87-year-old Miss Lucy on a fixed income and waiting on her nephew to come over to take something to the dump, but they moved it out to the backyard. So we have to maintain our discretion. Sometimes the inspectors know who's on the other side, and so we're struggling through and working our way through looking at code enforcement through an equity lens as we move throughout the city. But to your request with regard to mapping that process, I wouldn't be surprised if Deputy Commissioner Hessler can't pull that out of a file and send it in 2.5 seconds. I wouldn't be surprised at that, but we have probably mapped those processes out back in the day, and we probably already have something in file to honor your request.
Jason, you good? One other thing, I think this, you have a hammer. Oh, the nickname is warranted. Jason, do you know how many, I think they're called pattern and practice suits that we currently have open or that we have open at any given time on average?
We usually do like 30 of those a year, roughly. We picked up a little bit more because we've been working at least a lot pre-pandemic. We were working a lot with OPI and identifying the top citation offenders, and then engaging those individuals. And we look at it. We've been looking at like every 6 months to see not just who's getting the highest number of citations, but it's based off of like number of visits, because you could visit once and issue 1 citation or visit once and issue 6. So we're trying to like see where we're spending the most resources and who are the bigger problems, and then looking at where we're sending those citations so that we're not just addressing a single location, but if it's a business entity that has 50 locations in the city and we're hitting them all 2 or 3 times, not everything we touch ends up in a pattern and practice case. We can sometimes just make contact with the property owner, explain what the situation is, give them some advice on how to deal with, because a lot of times they'll come out and say like, oh, it's our dumpsters there and they're dumping. So we'll give them a list of things that they can do: move the dumpster, fence it in, post signs, educate your tenants, put up cameras, lighting. And then we will have Eric's team or Seth's team go back out and keep an eye on it and can address it without ever needing to file a case. In other situations, it's kind of a knucklehead situation, and we've got to file a case and bring in the hammer.
Got it. I think you should come to all budget hearings with a hammer moving forward, Jason. It's fantastic.
One get stopped at the front door.
And like the 900,000 block of Pennsylvania Avenue that we've been dealing with Seth and Greg Fox, that's an example of a pattern of practice, right? Okay, got it. Colleagues, any other questions for DHCD?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we're gonna go Council Vice President Middleton, and then Councilwoman Ramos, and then Conway. So Middleton, Ramos, Conway, Bullock.
This is for Booker and AKA Hammer. I guess that's going to stick. But two quick things. One comment. I want to thank you, Eric Booker, for your suggestions when we had the 311 informational hearing on taking out that word closed. We had our previous sessions with the 311 head, and they seem to be working to move forward with a number of suggestions that you had. And again, that shows that partnership and connections and working together. So my next thing is, and I brought it up to BDC, And you know how the Family Dollar has been such a nuisance around our entire city, and the problems and the way they are treating particularly our Black and brown communities. I know that you have been working fiercely on that. Is there an update with that? Are things kind of still at a standstill? Because I still see no improvement in these areas. You know, it just really hurts me when I see seniors in the community picking up trash around a business that should be doing that themselves, or either hiring a teenager or somebody to pay once a week to do those kind of things. It just shows the disconnect that particular the disrespect they have for Baltimore City.
Yes, yes, ma'am. We continue with our inspections. Jason, I'll let you go ahead and drive that one.
Yeah, actually, Chief Booker has his team doing inspections and issuing citations and responding to 311s. I have the Special Investigations Unit, like I talked earlier with OPI, that was one of the top offenders that was identified. So we've been doing every 3 to 4 weeks inspections of the top like 12 locations that have been the biggest problems, because some of their locations don't have a lot of problems and others are over the top. We have enough, we made contact with their senior management that then put us in touch with the local district manager, area manager, and we tried to address things that way, and really have not seen any significant changes that dissuaded us. And so prior to the pandemic, we were preparing to file a case. All of the attorneys were in court today, so I couldn't get an update as to exactly where that is, because Wednesdays are a court day. But if that case hasn't been filed, I'm sure it's scheduled to be filed shortly. We're just limited on the number of cases we can bring, with the courts just opening up and making up for basically the past year of delayed cases. But that's something that Family Dollar and Dollar Tree are under the same corporation. And we've been looking at all of their locations in the city and expect to see something soon. And then with your other comment, just as an update, during this budget hearing, I got an email from BCIT with the gentleman I've been working with, and they have a test environment for the first change to 311 with that messaging that we talked about. So we just need to check that and make sure it is accurate with how we expect it to work, and then they'll be able to go live with that. And I know I've been in meetings where they're pushing that on other agencies to follow the example that HCD has created in relation to closing out SRs with appropriate communication.
Thank you for that update. And as far as Family Dollar and you taking that to the next level, I'm sure if you need council members or even constituents to help you on your behalf in court, we are there to help you, so you can continue to hammer on. Thanks.
Jason, you're gonna pay me for the branding.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thanks to everybody for all your continued work and for being here today. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I have a question about CDBG. CDBG has been extremely important for so many community development organizations across the city. There has been a significant delay in getting the money out the door for those, and I think it's been like an 18-month delay. I don't see the director of that program here. Commissioner Kennedy, can you talk a little bit about that and what is going to be done to rectify that in the future?
Sure. There were a handful of CDBG awards that were delayed, that were in the longer period of time frame, and they were delayed for a number of different reasons, both on the DHCD side as well as on the awardee side in terms of providing information and getting things forward. One of the issues that we did face this year was the influx of the CDBG CV funding, which did delay because of the need to program that funding immediately for the eviction prevention. That actually took staff away from being able to work on the annual action plan and the 5-year plan as well, needing to program that money and do the necessary amendments and so forth to be able to work through those funds. So that has most impacted the CDBG 46 year, which is a different year than our fiscal year. So it's most impacted the CDBG 46 year because the development and approval of the annual action plan as well as the 5-year plan was delayed with getting that completed and to HUD. So we couldn't move forward on the 46-year awards until that was completed, which is now there, and awards are going out and contracts are in the pipeline. One updates that we did make in terms of process improvements for CDBG, this past application year for CDBG 46 was the first year that the application was online and electronic. We are also looking at process improvement to, how to even better that process moving forward for the next year. And staff is also undergoing a overall kind of workflow analysis to see what other levers can be pulled to increase the efficiency of moving those contracts through. And, one of the pieces too is, just also in terms of how the communication is between staff and back to the grantees when items are missing and so forth. Typically, I will admit, it's been we alert the grantee that an item's missing, and then the follow-up to the grantee of saying, go ahead and get it to us so we can move it, hasn't been the best on our part. So we have been putting in a proactive approach to proactively reaching out with the grantees as well to help ensure that they have any assistance or if things have changed so that we can move those through the pipeline. But it's been a conveyor belt approach. As the contracts and the documents come on, then the contracts are completed and they move through, and we are analyzing how to shift that. So we did have, there have been issues in past years, and I will say that this last year with the 46 grants have been, in terms of overall, not the best, but we have some of those impacts of the CDBG CV money, as well as we've had a couple of retirements, and those positions are being filled now too.
Thank you. I just saw Steve Jane's name pop up if he's around to answer.
Hi, Councilwoman. I am indeed here. How are you? To tag on to what Acting Commissioner Kennedy just said on a couple of the specifics. As you know, it's not a single factor that's caused these delays. It's multiple. And two of the biggest ones, actually the two big ones, are non-responsiveness by the subrecipients and then the pipeline backlog within the contract section at DHCD. We've made some progress on both of them. So I think the groups have become more responsive in terms of getting materials to us in a timely fashion. So that's improved. The MBU has improved a lot. That was for a number of contracts. That was one of the contributory factors. The pipeline, we still have like a lot of contracts coming into one person. We're trying to get another position on that. We're kicking them out faster than we were previously. I think the remainder of 46 will be a bit of a problem. We'll end up better than last year. After that, we should see significant improvement. It's frankly, it's still an issue. It's with us, but we're at least headed in the right direction.
Thank you. So it's a bit of a obviously in tough circumstances in COVID, but also a capacity issue in terms of the contracts, positions, and that kind of thing. So I think that's important for us to note. My second question is completely different. And I think that this would go to Mr. Hessler. I'm still going to use your real name, Mr. Hessler. What is the, we have talked a little bit about this, and I just want to know if this is a capacity issue. On a few occasions, there's been times where in the permit office, plans will get approved by somebody in permits, but then once the work gets done and it fails inspection, and because the plans were wrong, not that the person did the work badly, but the plans were wrong. And so the person who approved the plans shouldn't have approved the plans. So what's happening there, and how do we address it so that moving forward we don't have these issues with now people have to redo the work that shouldn't have been approved to begin with?
Sure. Yeah, that has happened on a couple of occasions. It's I don't think that extreme, and it's unfortunate when it happens. In every occasion, we revisit it with all of the staff and do a retraining to make sure that whatever may have been missed is picked up and won't be missed in the future. And so there's retraining on those. Most of it usually ends up getting picked up at the inspection level. And so, it can be corrected before it goes too far. It's not always the case. And sometimes it may appear that there's an error by staff, but sometimes it's that things go off course during construction from what was approved. So there's a little bit on both sides, but for sure, I know you and I particularly had two situations that were problematic and had to be resolved. And in both, there was a staff error, and that those individuals were retrained along with everyone else.
Okay, thanks. So it's a training and understanding issue. It's not necessarily that you need more people. Well, I guess you always need more people to do the work. Okay, got it. And my colleagues have asked all of my code enforcement questions. So again, thanks everybody for your incredible work.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Before we go to Councilman Conway, I just have a request for Mr. James. Can you give me a list of all the organizations that received CDBG money in the last 5 years in the 12th district?
5 years, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Do that now.
To all of us.
There are a lot of
Okay, all of us. Okay. Well.
Okay. We'll send you a list of everybody. Now, remember, many organizations operate citywide, so that they could be in without taking people from all over. But you're talking about the geography of operation here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Send us the list, I think, right?
Yeah, we'll get you a list and we'll tell you which districts, but keep in mind that they're taking, many of them are citywide, taking clients from all over the city.
Okay. Councilman Conway, thank you, Mr. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My next question is with regards to service 748 affordable housing. So first, great work meeting the outcome and for total affordable housing units created. Do we have data on how much subsidy each unit got from the city on average, and how many has each of the funding sources provided, or rather created for each new unit created?
Yes, we can get that to you. I can say off the top of my head, I'm actually trying to recollect one of our slides for a presentation where we are able to highlight exactly what the number is in terms of the cost per unit of what we've put in, but how much we've leveraged. So I can say that the affordable housing that the city is putting in terms of those dollars is highly leveraged with additional funding to create these units. And but we can provide that list for you.
Awesome, thank you. The other question I have is with regard to Service 749, property acquisition, disposition, and asset management. First, does this include the Vacancy Value Program?
Yes.
Okay, and do we have a map of where acquisitions, dispositions, and subsequent rehabs are happening?
Yes, we can get that to you. Yes.
That would be great. Yeah, I'm really just curious to understand where these tools are being deployed and if there might be patterns where rehabs and occupancy are not really popping up in the way that we would hope. That's all I have. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Bullock.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we talked about code enforcement a bit before, so I apologize if I'm being a bit redundant. But I know this is an issue that affects us in our district. I can think about the corner of Lafayette and Fulton, where we have on either side of the street, on both even and the odd side, two multifamily buildings where the owner does not have dumpsters there. And I know your team has been working with this. And I'm kind of asking this question because I know it's not just us, but there are other districts that are dealing with this. And I know Seth Greer from your team has been out there as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you're moving forward with litigation in these cases? Because we know it's a challenge. When folks don't have the dumpsters there, and essentially what we have is just dumping sites that continually or continuous hot spots that we pass by every day, and it grows and encourages more people to dump in those areas. So can you talk about how you're working with some of those building owners and operators as well?
Councilman, are you saying that they don't have dumpsters or they do have dumpsters and they're dumping around it?
They don't have dumpsters, and so the people in the building and people who are close to the building then bring their refuse to the back, and so you see it on both sides of the street. So I know that we all know the multifamily dwellings, they should have dumpsters. Again, they don't have the green trash cans, but some of them are really in violation, and they've gotten multiple citations over the years, but it still winds up being an ongoing problem.
Sure. I'm gonna say this, and then I'm gonna defer to Jason. The code does allow us to pretty much tell them that they have to have the proper receptacles for their mixed refuse. So if I would like to take a look at those to make sure that we have issued the appropriate notices, and at that point in the linear progression, it would move on to Deputy Commissioner Hessler. Jason.
Yeah. This particular location doesn't ring a bell for me, but just in general, the discussions that when we come across any kind of problematic apartment buildings or multifamily dwellings, the discussion we like to have is, when we can make contact with the owner and the property manager and they're receptive to it, is like, here are defensive measures you can take to prevent others from coming in and dumping. And the very first step is to educate your own tenants. And with the council's assistance, when we pass the licensing law, one of the things that's required is that landlords now provide their tenants with a brochure or an information sheet on when your trash day is, how to store your trash, where to put your trash, basically a sanitation little cheat sheet or a guide. Because that was some of the feedback we would get from a lot of residents was, well, you're hitting me with a $50 citation, but I didn't know I was supposed to put my trash in a can or out on Tuesday instead of Thursday, 2 days after pickup. So getting that information across, how they can defend the space as far as use of cameras, fencing, signage, keeping the area clean. When it gets to the point of litigation, then we're looking for a court order that can be enforced against them, requiring them to do some of those defensive measures, requiring them to keep a log and regularly visit maintain the area, clean it up, check on it, make sure there's no dumping or tenants putting out trash inappropriately. It could even be hiring a service. So depending on the size of the MFD, they may not have to have a dumpster. It may, because an MFD could be just 3 apartments. So they potentially could use trash cans and have city service for that. If you're talking an apartment complex, yeah, they should have dumpsters or some other kind of plan there. Increased pickup is always an option. So those are the things we look at and try to share with the property owners and managers. And hopefully
I appreciate that. And I'll just say, again, your team, has been great. Commissioner Booker, all you guys, doing some great work. So just want to highlight some of these issues. I know, these are not just germane to our district. I know others are dealing with it as well, but do appreciate your work. I will say, in all fairness, the area got cleaned up. It came right back. So it's not as if these issues aren't being addressed. So I just want to make that point. So thank you.
And Councilman, if you could send me some specific locations, I like to follow up on that because part of the function of the ombudsman is mediation before we bring pain, so to speak. So I like to try to work people to the right solution before we start punishing them, especially in this particular time. So send me those
Absolutely.
particular locations and I'll work that. Thank you.
Send that to you directly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilman. Chairman Costello, it's your show now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, do we have any other questions for DHCD? Burnett, then Ramos.
Am I coming in clear?
Very clear, sir.
Okay, just want to make sure because it looks a little delayed on my end. I just had one really quick follow-up on service 752 community outreach services. Actually, I don't know how I missed this one in previous years. Are there responses? Are they mainly following up on like emergency situations, or are there other ways that citizens can engage with their services? Is it like an intake line or a call line, or is it how does that work?
So majority it's in response to emergency situations. And if there is a need of assistance, we can provide the phone number for our light intake and assessment unit. And that is one way that we're actually aligning all of the services across all of the city services, including community outreach services in conjunction with our other home repair and social service coordination, because there was a disconnect there within the agency. So our light intake and assessment unit would be the way to have a general citizen contact for assistance across a number of different, not just home repair. I mean, when we work with citizens, we screen them for over 250 different local, state, and federal programs that they may be qualified for.
Cool, makes sense. I'll instruct my staff accordingly. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I didn't see Live Baltimore on the schedule for today, so I have a Live Baltimore question, and I don't know if Annie's on the line. So maybe we could just.
Councilwoman, I don't think she is. We didn't invite her, but we can have her come in on. Just bear with me 1 second, because we have an opening on Monday at 1 p.m. Does that work for you?
If she's available, that would be great. Yeah.
I'm certain that she can make herself available. Natasha, can you please have someone from your team help out with, or Mira, getting Live Baltimore here on Monday, June 7th at 1 p.m. Thank you so much, ma'am. Well,
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
absolutely. Thank you. Great suggestion. Are you good? Otherwise, Councilwoman?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. Colleagues, any other questions for DHCD? Okay. Acting Commissioner Kennedy, thank you so much for everything you do every day. And all the folks at DHCD. Want to take a moment to thank a couple people. Kimberly Rubens, who used to work on the 4th floor here, who we all know very well. Stephanie Murdoch, who's an all-star, helps us nonstop. Mr. Jeff Veal from zoning, certainly Kate Edwards, I'm very appreciative for her efforts, and Upton and Druid Heights, which I know is a priority area for community development for DHCD. And especially Jason Hessler, the Hammer, as well as Eric Booker. You guys are incredible. I can't tell you how much I appreciate everything you guys do. Booker, 2 a.m. phone calls, whatever it is, you are always there. And Jason, all the work, especially on the outdoor seating stuff last summer, to take a process that used to take 90 days and cut it down to 3 days. We went from 3 months to 3 days, and you are a huge part of that. So thank you so much. But I also recognize that as great as the two of you guys are, you guys have wonderful people that work for you. And specifically 3 of the most incredible people in city government: Seth Greer from the Special Investigations Unit, Peggy White, who handles permits from your team, Jason, and Erica Yates from your team, Booker. Can't tell you how much I appreciate all 3 of those folks. So I don't know if they're on the line, but if you could please pass that along. And Deputy Mayor Carter, I know you're here with us along with City Administrator Shorter. Just so you all know, we have some real serious rock stars that work at DHCD that are doing incredible work every day. Those folks should be applauded, and want you to know they're really appreciated by the City Council. So thank you all very much. We're going to go into recess. Colleagues, we got a dinner break from 5:30 to 6. We'll be coming back at 6 p.m. sharp. We're going to have BMZA here. I know another person from DHCD who needs a shout out, Katie Burns, who's kind of on loan to BMZA for the time being, wearing a dozen different hats as usual. So we got BMZA at 6, and then we're going to have our nightcap is going to be DOT this evening at 7 p.m. So look forward to seeing everyone back here at 6 p.m. sharp. We're now in recess. Thank you.